Can you hear me? Why does it keep muting me? Do not mute me again, StreamYard, or I will go back and find another program and try another one. Good Lord. Are they all not user friendly on purpose? Is it? I found Restream last night and I was like, yay, it works just like StreamYard. So maybe it wasn't Restream because the mic did the same thing when I used StreamYard. But Court TV kept buffering. I don't know what to do. I guess Monday. I guess Monday I'm gonna have to call my internet provider and say, "Give me the highest level, give me the highest speed, because I still got problems." I think it's still cheaper than what my old internet was. Okay, I think it's working now. So I'm gonna say hi to everybody. Hey, Judy, Nancy, Terry. Who else is here? Wasn't somebody else here earlier? There's 5 people in here. Who else here? Carla, hey. Nancy, Judy, Terry. Hey guys, I'm so glad you're here. And I'm not going anywhere today because all of our plans fell through. My cousin's sick, so we didn't go to Orlando. My husband found out that the RC track that he wanted to go to is closed. They're going to relocate though, so we will be going there another time. Um, he's going to work on his RC cars, or he's got so many RC things. I don't even know what he's doing half the time. So if you hear, of course, he's still in bed right now, but so if you hear engine noises, it's just his RC cars he's playing with. But that'll be later. And I don't know how long we're going to go today. I feel great today. No headache, no backache. I can bend over now and pick stuff up. I couldn't do that before. I dropped something and Travis would be like, "Are you going to pick that up?" No, because it hurts to bend over. So I can actually bend over now and pick something up, which, people take stuff like that for granted. But when you have degenerative disc disease, you don't do things like that. Well, thank you, Nancy. I'm surprised because my cousin, who was 3 years younger than me, has the same stuff that I do, and she's been through all this before me. And the things that don't work for her usually don't work for me. Um, like I had the injections first, and they didn't work for her. So I figured, and the nerve block didn't work for her. So I figured the nerve block was not going to work for me either. But they have to go through those steps before they do surgery. So I did not expect the nerve block to work either. And it has. And I'm so happy. I can, walk normally. When I stand up, I'm not like all bent over and slowly, have to straighten myself up, and it's I'm so happy. Anyway, um so we got through the hearing in the trial. um, and doctor, I did it again. Judge, I don't know why I keep calling him doctor. Um, Oh, wow. We have everything the same, don't we? We both have fibromyalgia. Whoop, wrong one. We both have degenerative disc disease. Yep. A lot of fibromyalgia comes with comorbidities, and that seems to be one of them. Now, my cousins have an autoimmune disease with theirs. One, two cousins have rheumatoid arthritis. One of my cousins has lupus, and they have fibromyalgia. They like all go together. So we finished the hearing within the trial, and Judge Fiddler said that um, he wasn't going to put Dr. Lee in contempt and make him produce the whatever it was he put in that vial, because he said that he honestly believes that he doesn't have it anymore, that he believes he had it at one time, but he probably doesn't have it anymore. So he wasn't going to go through all of the, contempt type things that he would have to do to get him to present that, because he honestly believes he doesn't have it anymore. Um, so there would be an instruction to the jury about that, so that when Dr. Lee testifies in the actual trial to the jury, that there will be an instruction to the jury explaining the deal about the maybe supposed fingernail, the white object with the uneven edges. So that's over. I think that hearing is over. And that was a decision that the judge made. So now we're back to regular trial. So this is a paramedic. The next witness, I believe, is a cop. So
All right, back on the record. The defendant is now present with his counsel. The district attorneys are present. The jurors and the alternates are not present yet.
The defense counsel, and we emailed our witness list. We're going to be calling David Riggs and Esther Pineda Rodriguez this afternoon, based on some of the cross-examination yesterday with Officer Heckers, and a little extra time today that we didn't expect. And I know the court was very clear about trying to fill the day up.
Okay.
We've been doing as best we can. We at least have two witnesses today.
All right.
And Ms. Bodden may need a little bit of time between one of the witnesses, because although we did email Mr. Rosen yesterday, Ms. Bodden
Mr. Dixon?
Well, I was just going to, no fault over there, but it does highlight a continued problem is when we tell one person who we're going to call but doesn't quite get the whole group over there. Mr. Rosen, and that's why we've been sending Mr. Rosen emails, because he and I communicate often, and I send him those emails, and then Kenny Bodden says he doesn't get it. So I just asked the clerk to maybe ask him to designate one person that we need to communicate with. It's difficult communicating with 5 or 6 or however many.
I thought that you had selected one person to be the lead lawyer. That's you, isn't it, Mr. Rosen?
Yes.
We got this at 6 o'clock last night and still had Carrie Crusoe on it.
Okay,
That's the problem.
Mr. Rosen will be your point person, and he's responsible and will be severely punished if he doesn't communicate.
I thought that's what you've been doing to me all along.
Oh, just wait.
You mean the best is yet to come?
Just you wait. There's another issue. You had submitted to me this email, I guess it's from Mr. Pavlik. The question, I think it's discoverable.
No, that's totally up to the court. I haven't seen it under 1054, but that's.
I do. Okay, turn it over.
That's what it's all.
That's right. All right, thank you.
Do you want us to mark this one during the Z? That would be the EMT.
As soon as they come out.
As soon as they come out.
Okay. Let's bring out the jurors. All right, the record will now reflect the presence of the jurors and the alternates, and you wanted to mark an exhibit?
Yes, sir. I think we're up to Z. If I recall.
Correct.
From yesterday, it would be the 3-page report, EMS report, and the second page is out of hospital care report, pages 2 and 3 that Mr. Michael Brown indicated he was testifying about yesterday.
Okay, thank
For
you.
the record, thank you.
All right. Your next exhibit will be AA. Okay. You ready to proceed?
We are.
You may.
We would ask David Riggs to join us, please.
You solemnly swear that the testimony you give in the cause of nothing before the court shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
Please state and spell your name for the record.
David Riggs, DAVID-RIGGS.
Thank you. You may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Sir, could you tell the jurors what you do for a living presently?
I'm a paramedic firefighter for Alhambra Fire Department.
And what was your job back in 2003?
The same, paramedic firefighter.
What did your duties include?
Responding to emergency calls, providing aid, public assist,
Medical aid as well as,
medical aid, as well as fire response, yes.
okay. So you were both a qualified firefighter as well as a qualified paramedic/EMT?
Paramedic is the correct term,
That's
yes.
the correct designation?
Yes,
Did I just insult you with the EMT part?
not at all.
All right. We heard yesterday some testimony about the differences between paramedics and EMTs, and I must say I was completely confused. You have to become an EMT before you're a paramedic, right?
That's correct.
Okay, so the EMTs are little people to you.
Not at all. No, there's EMT1, EMT2, EMTP,
Okay.
and the P is paramedic.
And I said that jokingly. Obviously, a paramedic is substantially higher on the echelon than a beginning EMT, correct?
That's correct.
You have more training,
Yes,
more on-the-job training, as well as more formal training.
yes.
Okay. What qualifies you to perform those duties? What training, let's talk about that for just a second. What training have you endured to become a paramedic and firefighter and do these responsive things that you've talked about?
As a firefighter, attended a state certified fire academy and then a training tower at the Alhambra Fire Department and then an 18-month probationary period. As a paramedic, I was sent by our fire department to Paramedic Training Institute in Los Angeles, where we did, I believe it's 9 months of coursework and then several months of field work as well.
And what does that coursework and field work include? Give me an example.
Basic life support skills, and then advanced life support skills, cardiac interpretation, the administration of drugs.
Are you qualified to make pronouncements of death?
Yes.
What education, training, and background qualifies you to make pronouncements of death?
Actually, if I may make a correction, as a paramedic, the only pronouncement of death can come from an MD.
Okay.
We are allowed to determine death based on some county protocols.
So the county protocol actually makes a distinction between a pronouncement of death officially and a determination of death.
Correct.
All right, so you make determinations of death at the scene, whereas a medical doctor at some point subsequent to that may make the official pronouncement of death, which appears on a death certificate, for instance.
That's correct.
Okay. Let me ask you that next question then. What qualifies you, what education, training, and background qualifies you to make those determinations of death?
The assessment of and for basic life functions, and in the absence of those basic life functions, we can determine death based on county policies.
All right. And does that include a determination of respiratory and cardiac functioning?
Respiratory, cardiac, and simple nervous system functions.
All right. And that can also include certain electronics that you may utilize. I don't necessarily need you to go into them at this point, but certain electronics that you may utilize during the course of making those assessments?
That is one option available to us.
Okay. We'll talk to you about that in just a second. Back in February of 2003, specifically in the early morning hours of February 3rd, 2003, what fire station were you assigned to?
Station 74.
Where is Station 74?
2505 West Norwood
Is that in?
in the city of Alhambra.
Okay, that's in Alhambra specifically. Were you working with a partner that morning?
Yes, I was.
Who was your partner?
Rod Marino,
How do you spell his last name?
Merino.
Did you and or your partner receive any kind of a call out in the early morning hours of February 3rd, 2003?
Yes, we did.
Describe that for us, please.
We had been at another address on a previous call when we received a dispatch to 1700 South Grandview. We were told that the report included shots fired, and so we were to stage out, not proceed immediately into the address.
What time did you start your shift that day or within the 12 hours prior to that call out?
Our shift starts at 8 a.m., so that would have been 8 a.m. on the previous morning,
Okay. And how long is the normal shift?
24 hours.
And then I assume you get a couple of days off after that.
Yes,
Okay. You indicated that you staged in response to that call out, you staged at an area. What does that mean, to stage at an area?
to stage is to not proceed directly into the address, but to wait in a designated area for purposes of safety.
All right. I assume because you're a firefighter, you do not carry a gun.
That's correct.
Your partner does not carry a gun.
Correct.
Okay. So when you talk about safety, are you talking about safety of yourself as well as the general public when you're staging at a particular scene?
Generally, staging is specifically in regards to crew safety.
And you would be one of the crew.
Yes.
What time did you get to the staging location on February 3rd, 2003?
If I may review my notes, it was just a few minutes after 5 a.m.
Would that refresh your recollection?
Yes.
If you just tell us what you're referring to, we can probably follow along.
Yes, of course.
With the court's permission.
Absolutely. This is a copy of the EMS form that was filled out that morning after the call.
Okay. Would that refresh your recollection as to what time you actually began staging?
Yes.
Okay. What time was that?
We arrived on scene at staging at 10 minutes after 5 a.m.
And where exactly was that staging location?
We staged at Grandview and Norwood.
All right. How far is that from the location of 1700 Grandview?
Approximately 1 block.
Take a look at what's previously been marked as People's 21 for identification, if you don't mind. It bears 2 photographs, People's 21A and 21B. 21A is a little bit dark. Can you see the area that I'm highlighting with my laser pointer right there?
Yes.
What is that area?
That is the house at 1700.
Okay. And it sits atop a sort of triangular, very large hill, correct?
Yes.
And there's lots of foliage around that hill, correct?
Yes.
The entrance is somewhere down in photograph 21A, where my laser pointer is now.
Yes.
Your Honor, for the record, I've indicated in the last 2 answers to the witness's question, basically the only residence prominently displayed in the middle of the foliage in photograph 21A, and then with regard to the driveway, basically dead center toward the bottom of photograph A.
Yes.
Thank you. Where you actually staged, I assume, is not on this photograph. You said you were about a block away.
That's correct.
How long did you stay at the staging location before you were actually, or I guess I should ask you foundationally, were you actually allowed entrance onto the premises?
We were allowed, yes.
All right, how long did you stay? Okay. Is it normal operating procedure in a call out like this where shots are presumed to have been fired to stage away from the location until the location can be completely secured for your presence and your crew's presence?
Yes,
Okay, so this was not out of the ordinary.
correct.
You said it was approximately 1 hour that you staged. About what time was it, if you can refresh your recollection, if you don't know off the top of your head, that you actually made your way onto the premises?
It would be an estimate, but I would say approximately 6:05, 6:10 a.m.
Okay, and where did you go onto the premises?
Initially, we met with a police officer at the gate, and then we entered the front door, which is on the north side of the address.
Okay. Take a look at what's been previously marked, I believe, as People's 24, A, B, C, and D. Does that appear, or does that exhibit appear to depict certain photographs that reflect the front entrance?
Yes, A and B look like the gate through which we entered.
That's A and B?
Correct.
Okay, and C?
C is the staircase leading to the front door,
And D?
a continuation of the staircase.
And obviously where my laser pointer is, that appears to be the front door, correct?
Yes,
Did you make your way into the residence?
yes.
What was the purpose for your having been called out there? What did you understand the purpose for your having been called out there for?
My understanding of the initial call at approximately 5 a.m. that morning was that shots were fired and there may be a shooting victim at that address.
So you went prepared to make any assessment of a possible gunshot victim, correct?
That was our mindset when we arrived at staging.
How many times before this incident on February 3rd, 2003, would you estimate you'd responded to shots fired calls where a victim was actually injured by a gunshot?
As a paramedic, probably 3 in my short history at that time.
All right. At this point, how many assessments or determinations of death had you made? For any reason, by the way.
That would be an estimate again, but probably 20, maybe more.
Okay. When you walked into the entrance of the front door, what did you find?
There were maybe a half dozen police officers busying themselves in the foyer. There was a woman in a chair in a slumped position to my left. She appeared to be dead just on initial, my initial perception. And the police indicated that she was the reason we were there, and we were there strictly to determine death.
Okay. They have to smoke you.
Yes.
I'd like you to take a look at what's been previously marked as People's 24 for identification. It's a series of 5 photographs. I'm sorry, I misread this. 29. Do you recognize, starting with photograph A, what's depicted in that photograph?
Yes,
Describe that for us. How do you recognize it?
that's the foyer of the address to which we were sent. And that is our victim in the chair against the wall.
Is that the perspective that you saw when you walked into the front door? In other words, walking the same direction as the camera is pointed right now?
Yes.
All right. Photograph B, do you recognize the person depicted in photograph B?
Yes.
How do you recognize her?
She was the victim that I assessed.
When you indicated you saw a female victim that appeared to be slumped in a chair, is this what you're describing?
That's correct.
All right. Did her position move any at all before you touched her? In other words, was she moving at all?
No.
All right. Did that play into your initial assessment when you walked in before you had done your full determination that she was deceased? All right. I'm assuming photograph C accurately reflects what you saw. That. Taking a look at photograph D and E, do you see that appears to be on the victim's face?
Yes.
Is that how she appeared when you saw her?
Yes.
In photograph D specifically, her head appears tilted or slumped to her left. Is it when you saw her?
Yes.
I'd like to mark for identification 2 sets of photographs, Your Honor. They appear on 8.5 by 11 sheets of paper. They both bear 2 photographs, A and B. People's next in order, I think, is 39.
It is 39 A and B.
Thank you. I'll place a P39 on the first set of photographs.
So you want to mark them as 2 exhibits now, 39 and 40, or 39 A and B?
39 A and B bears 2 photographs. 40 A and B is 2 separate photographs.
All right, thank you. You may.
Take a look at what's been marked as people's 39 A and B. Specifically, I want to draw your attention. Actually, this may be better served, Your Honor, if the witness can actually see the photo close.
That's fine.
Lost in translation on that element. Take a look at what's been previously marked as people's 39 for identification, sir, and tell me if you recognize what appears to be on the victim's left side of the jacket. Do you see that?
The victim's left side of the jacket is not depicted.
I'm sorry, I said left. I'm standing here looking at my left. It's her right side. My mistake. I'm sorry. What appears in 39 A and B to be on the right side of her jacket?
That appears to be blood on the lapel.
Is that how you, I'm sorry?
And on the jacket.
All right. Is that how you found her when you walked into the foyer that morning?
It is.
Did you see blood, that type of significant amount of blood on her left side?
Not on the clothing anywhere, no.
All right. Take a look at what's been marked as people's 40 now. Do you see the left side of the victim's jacket
Yes.
in both photograph A and a closer photograph B?
Yes.
Is that approximately how it appeared when you walked in and saw the victim as she lay slumped in the chair?
Yes, it is.
All right. Again, I've asked you to, that's fine. And I should ask you before we take that off, well, that's okay. The picture's in front of you. Did there appear to be any significant blood on her left side?
No.
All right. Most of the blood flow was on her right side. Is that right?
There was a minor amount of flow transversing the chest, but the majority of the blood appeared to be on the patient's right side.
Okay. Were you able to make a determination, sir, based on your observation of the victim as she lay in state, as she lay in that chair slumped, with the significant amount of blood on her right side, yet her head was tilted to the left? Were you able to make a determination in your mind as to whether or not her head had been moved at some point subsequent to that substantial bleeding?
The question occurred to me, how did the blood get on the patient's right side? I couldn't make a concrete determination, but the question did cross my mind on the scene. It's possible that the patient's head was moved.
All right. Did you notice blood on the victim's face?
Yes.
Did you notice blood on the victim's face other than the coming from the nose and the mouth?
No.
Okay. Did you notice blood on her chest.
Yes.
Where on her chest?
As depicted on People's 40 A and B, it appears to have run from her nose and mouth across her chest from the patient's left to right.
Did you check the victim for any vital signs?
Yes,
Did you check her carotid pulse?
I did.
On what side of her neck did you check her? Well, first of all, I guess you should tell us, where do you check carotid pulses?
The carotid artery runs, there's a branch on either side of the neck.
May the record reflect when the witness indicated on either side of the neck he was pointing to, basically just beneath his chin on either side of his Adam's apple.
Correct.
Can you check the carotid pulse on the right side as well as the left side?
Yes, you can.
Which side did you check the victim's carotid pulse on, if you recall?
As I recall, it was the patient's right side, the exposed side.
Did you move her head in any way to check her carotid pulse?
Not to check the pulse, no.
What other vitals did you check?
I assessed her respiratory status.
What does that mean?
I listened to her lungs to see if she was breathing, exchanging any air.
Did you do that vis-a-vis a stethoscope?
Yes,
Okay. And what was your finding?
that she was not breathing.
What was your finding with regard to your checking of her carotid pulse?
I felt no pulse.
Did you check her airway?
I did. In order to determine that she was breathing, I manipulated the patient's head or the victim's head as minimally as possible just to open the airway.
All right. If there was blood, sir, on her right ear, in her hair, up on her cheek, on the bridge or the top of her nose, is it conceivable that you smeared that blood to her ear, hair, cheeks, and top of her nose?
It's conceivable.
How did you touch her face?
With gloved hands on either side of the jaw and bringing the face somewhat to a midline versus the angle she's in, and attempting to thrust the jaw forward slightly.
Okay. And you were using your fingertips to indicate to the jurors exactly how you're repositioning her head.
Yes.
Were you doing that in order to minimize any contamination of the body?
Yes.
Are you trained to minimize contamination or moving of evidence on a decedent's body?
Yes.
Were you attempting to follow that training when you were moving slightly the victim's head to reposition her to check for the airway response?
Yes, I was.
All right, take a look again at take a look, if you will. This is may I approach? May I approach?
You may.
Thank you. Take a look at people's, it's been marked as people's time. It's a close-up, especially the bottom right photograph. We have another photograph on the overhead of the victim's face. Actually, Susan, look, go back to 29. If you don't mind, I mean, I'm sorry, on the, yeah. There we go. Okay. Now we're looking at the same thing. We will be in a second. Okay, take a look at People's 29, photograph B, if you don't mind. And in your, I'm sorry, where's 29? Sorry about that, Jim. There we go. Okay. Take a look at photograph E on People's 29, finally. You indicated that you sort of delicately touched her cheeks in order to move her head slightly to the left and right.
More the jawline itself than the cheeks.
Okay. Did you touch her ears?
No.
Did you touch the bridge of her nose?
No.
Did you touch the upper part of her cheeks underneath her eyes?
No.
Okay, so if in fact blood appeared in the hair, the
right ear, up on the bridge of the nose, the cheeks where I'm pointing left and right. Did you put that blood there?
No,
Okay. So when you indicated just a second ago that it's conceivable that you could have moved some blood, are you talking about a slight amount of blood around her jawbone area?
yes,
Okay. If there was other blood smeared around her face, ear, hair, the bridge of her nose, you did not do that?
correct,
Okay. And this is how she appeared when you saw her, correct?
yes,
So that blood was already smeared where it is now when you first saw her.
yes,
So however that blood got smeared, it was done before you ever made contact with the victim. Is that right?
yes,
Getting back to the vital signs, do you also check for a pain, Sudi, we can take that off. Do you also check for a pain response, sir?
yes, I do.
How do you do that?
By applying if I may, putting a pen between the patient's fingers and then squeezing the fingers together, it provides enough pain that a patient would normally try to withdraw their hand.
Okay. Now the record reflects the witness has indicated a writing pen, PEN, placed between the index and middle finger of his left hand and squeezing the two fingers together at the tips.
Correct.
Did the victim in this case have any pain response whatsoever?
She did not.
Did you also check any pupillary response?
Yes, I believe I did,
Do you need to refresh your recollection
if I may.
with the court's permission?
Yes.
Yes, after assessing her pupils, I found them to be fixed in midpoint.
What did that tell you? The pain, the negative results from the pain response and the negative results from the pupillary response coupled with the other vital signs that you had checked?
That the patient was dead.
Did you check the victim for any specific gunshot wounds or injuries?
I did attempt to determine a specific injury for my purposes in order to document an injury consistent with why the patient was found dead on scene. With the permission of an officer on scene, and I don't recall the officer's name, I asked, can I move her head a little bit more so that I can try to find a wound? And he said, try to keep it to a bare minimum. Having lifted the patient's hair and peered around the right side of the patient's head, I was unable to find any specific entrance or exit wound consistent with a gunshot. And I was told at that time, don't disturb anything further. We'll let the coroner determine those injuries.
So your review of her head and neck area for injuries was, it's safe to say, at a bare minimum.
Correct.
At the direction of any of the officers at the scene, did you place any electrodes or patches on the victim to finally check for any vital signs?
Yes, I did.
Describe that for the jurors, please.
Using a heart monitor, we applied 4 electrode patches, 2 just below the clavicles and 2 on her mid thigh, so that we can visually see an electronic response of any heart rhythm, and there was none.
Do you know what asystole means?
Yes,
What does that mean?
it means without rhythm, without electrical activity.
What those of us in the lay community might call flatline.
Correct.
Was she flatline?
Yes.
Based on your entire review, sir, and all of your experience as a paramedic, what were your findings as to the ultimate determination of death for the victim after you got through with all of your assessments?
That she was dead, that she had been dead a significant, enough time that there was no appropriate resuscitative measure called for.
Was there a time that you actually made a determination of death and jotted that time down or noted that time?
Yes.
What time was that?
6:25.
Thank you, Your Honor. That's all I have.
Thank you. Cross-examination.
should I address you, Mr. Riggs, paramedic Riggs, firefighter Riggs? What do you prefer?
Mr. Riggs is fine,
Mr.
thank
Riggs,
you.
hi. I am Linda Kenny Bodden, and I'm going to be cross-examining you on behalf of Mr. Spector, okay? You additionally, when you got to the scene, I think you just told Mr. Jackson that you saw about 6 people in the foyer area that we've seen pictures of, or foyer area?
An approximation, yes.
Okay. And did you see any of those people reflected in the pictures that you just saw of the foyer area and the decedent?
No,
Okay. And were you ever asked to diagram where you had seen the pictures in the foyer area
No.
of people? Okay. And did you know any of the names of the pictures in the foyer area where the decedent was when you got there?
no, I didn't.
Okay. Did you see, were you wearing gloves?
Yes, I was.
Did you see anybody else in the area wearing gloves?
I don't recall.
Okay. And when you came into the house, by the way, and you had been staged outside, you actually had a conversation when you were down at the hill with one of the officers from Alhambra, correct?
Not at the bottom of the hill, but just outside the gate, yes.
Just outside the gate, okay. And was it a police officer you knew?
No,
Okay. But you asked the police officer what a DB is, correct?
no, I asked the police officer if this was a DB,
If this was a DB. What is a DB?
a dead body.
Okay. And as a result of that, he told you that it was, correct?
Yes,
Okay. And then you advised the police officer, correct me if I'm wrong, that if they wanted to preserve the crime scene and avoid having more people involved, they could do without you, right?
correct.
Because you told the police officer that they could tell whether the body had been deceased, correct?
Yes,
All right. And even though you told the police officer that if they wanted to preserve the scene intact, they could do without you, they still asked you to come in, correct?
yes,
Okay. And when you came to the house up at the top, you were told to watch your step very carefully, right?
yes.
And what is your understanding as to why you should watch your step very carefully when you come into any scene that could be considered a crime scene or a death scene?
My understanding was I was advised to watch my steps so that I didn't disturb any evidence.
Okay. And you know then your training as a paramedic that disturbing any evidence could be important, right?
Yes,
All right. But whenever you come, is it fair to say to any scene where there has been a decedent, you understand that you're going to have to disturb some evidence because you have to touch the body, right?
yes,
And you're going to have to walk through the area to get to the body, correct?
yes,
So every time you go into a place to perform your job, you understand there's going to be some disturbance of the scene, correct?
yes,
Okay. And in this type of situation, you told the police officers that because this was a dead body, they could actually not have you come in and do those further disturbances, right?
yes.
Okay. Now, when you were dispatched here in the first place, I think you said that you were dispatched as a report of shots fired.
We were advised by our captain that there was a possible,
Correct?
yes,
Okay. And you didn't know when you came to Grandview whether or not that was correct or not, whether it had been shots, no shots, 1 shot, or 10 shots, right?
I didn't know.
All right. And when you examined the decedent, you were looking to see evidence of a bullet wound, right?
I was looking for a wound,
A wound, right? But you knew that there'd been a report for shots, right?
yes.
And so were you particularly looking for possibly a bullet wound?
That was on my list, yes,
Okay, that was on your list along with other things,
yes,
right? Because you want to be objective and you don't want to discount anything until you get to a scene as a paramedic, right?
correct.
Is it fair to say that your initial or your main purpose of going to a scene is to render assistance?
Yes,
Okay. And here, there was no assistance that you could render, obviously.
correct.
Okay. And usually the assistance would be to a person who is living and hopes to save their life and get them treatment as fast as possible.
Yes.
Right? Now, you indicated to Mr. Jackson that after performing your examinations, you could not find on the outside of the body any evidence of a gunshot wound or any wound, right?
Correct.
All right. And so that when you finally performed the analysis, the EKG analysis and the other analysis, at that point, you made no determination of whether or not this was a gunshot wound or not, did you?
I made no determination of the cause of death.
Of the cause of death, because that's not your area.
Correct.
In any event, you could not see that was easily accessible or seeable to you any indication that there was a gunshot wound outside the face.
Correct.
Okay. Now, in addition to the reports, and you did an EMT report on this, correct?
An EMS report, yes.
Right, an EMS report, emergency medical services report.
Yes.
Sometimes it's called emergency medical technician or service. Not here.
Okay.
Okay, all right. And that really tells you the time that you come and how long you're called in, and it's basically a record, so you know when you came, what the response time was, and what the result was, right?
Yes.
Now, I noticed that when Mr. Jackson was asking you questions,
Don't try to make your mistake look right. You said the wrong thing, woman. Just let it go.
a number of times you responded with the word that you had looked at the victim. Now, did you know what the circumstances of the shooting were at the time you were making your examination?
No.
Okay. So when you go to any scene, you can go to a scene to render assistance, whether it be a crime or whether it be a self-inflicted type wound somebody gets, correct?
Yes.
And you would not use, or would you use the term victim in describing a person who had been shot by their own hand?
No, generally I use the word patient.
Okay. And so when you use the word victim here, had you already made an assessment at the time you were there that she was a victim?
No.
Have you made an assessment yourself since that she's a victim?
Not necessarily, no.
Right, because that's not within your purview, right?
Correct.
Okay. And so when you get into the house, and I understand you had a partner with you, right?
Yes.
And the partner's name was Mr. Marino?
Correct.
Okay. And he was told to stay outside the house.
Yes.
And the reason your understanding is that he was told to stay outside the house was because the more people who traipsed into a scene, whether it be a crime scene or a death scene, the more likely that evidence could be removed or contaminated.
Objection, Your Honor, that calls for speculation.
It's asking his understanding. I'll allow that. Overruled.
That is my understanding.
Okay. And that's part of the training that you have, right?
Yes.
Because sometimes you have to work hand in hand with the police department on cases, whether they be death scenes or crime scenes, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Now, you were, at that point, you brought in your drug box?
Yes.
What is a drug box?
A large plastic box. It's would also commonly be referred to as a first aid kit.
Okay. All right. And you said that you also made notes about this incident, correct?
That's correct.
And you made the notes beginning on February 4th as a follow-up to, or let me ask you this, you made the notes first on February 4th, correct? To start. Would you like to see a copy? Would that help refresh you?
I have a copy.
You have a copy?
As
Okay.
I recall, I made them upon returning to the station that same morning.
Okay. Does it refresh your recollection as to the top of the notes as to what the date is on them? And it's okay if you look, Your Honor?
Yes.
Thank you. I don't think I need to mark them.
I see that, yes, February 4th.
Okay, so does that refresh your recollection that you made the notes beginning on February 4th, 2003?
Yes.
All right, and you actually went to Grandview on February 3rd, 2003?
Yes.
Okay. Now, why did you make these notes?
Because it was anticipated that this was a crime scene and that it might involve a trial.
Okay, who told you that this may be a crime scene?
My captain.
Okay, and what is your captain's name?
Mark Lingle, Lingle.
Okay, and when did he tell you that this may be a crime scene as opposed to a death scene?
After we returned to the station,
Okay. And he asked you to make these notes in addition to the normal report you would have, so that you would have complete notes to refresh your recollection and to record what happened on that evening, right?
yes,
And so that if there was any confusion as to what happened on that evening, you could refer back to your notes to get it exactly the way it should be.
Yes.
What happened, right? Okay. Now, when you came in, you were led to this was in a slouch position,
yes,
okay? And feet were straight out, correct?
yes,
And did you write in your notes that her chin was resting on her chest?
I believe so, yes,
Okay? And you were also interviewed later on in March by someone from the Los Angeles Sheriff's Department, right?
yes.
Okay. Did you ever tell her in the center of her chest?
Not that I recall.
Okay. Did you ever tell the person you were interviewed that you saw bloodstains on both the right and a left jacket?
Not that I recall.
Okay. Now, on the floor in front of her were also what you appeared to see as taser leads, right?
Yes,
And we're up to double A, I guess, now? CO10A-4.
I like the way she lawyers. I like the way she asks questions. I like her demeanor. I don't like the touchy-feely with her client, though. It's weird.
Can you see that from there, or would you like to see the picture, the closer picture?
but specifically, what am I looking for? I can see the picture, but some detail is lost.
Yes, I'll tell you what, let me give you the picture if it'd be easier.
Yes. Sorry.
On the bottom, right, let me see if I can do it here. Or I guess in the middle, right. You see this object here?
Yes,
Do you know what that object is?
as I recall, it's a police shield.
Was that object here when you entered the house that morning?
Yes,
Okay. Did you ask anybody as to why that object was there?
no,
Did you have to step over that object, or did you come in from this way?
I came in from the bottom of this
The
picture.
bottom of this picture up?
Yes,
Okay. Did you make a recording of that object being there and any notes that you had or any other documents that you possessed with regard to this matter?
yes, in my supplemental notes.
And your supplemental notes, okay? And when you saw the decedent, also, you indicated that you did check her pulse, correct?
Yes,
And that's what you talked to here, that you put your hands, when you did earlier, on the
Yes.
sides of her neck, like I'm doing here?
yes.
Resting below my chin, kind of touching the chin line,
But I was assessing for the pulse more to the side of the windpipe.
more to the side of the, over here.
Yes,
Am I doing it correctly? Sort
it
of?
appears so from here, yes.
Okay, all right. And you were wearing gloves when you did that, right?
Yes,
All right. What happened to the gloves that you had, that you used to assess the decedent when you're touching her?
I don't recall.
Did anyone ask you to leave the gloves at the scene to be collected?
Not that I specifically recall.
Okay. And you also indicated you checked for the pupil response in her left eye, was it?
I don't recall which eye.
All right. Do you have your notes in front of you?
Yes,
Would they help refresh your recollection? I'll look at the bottom third of the 3 paragraphs.
Yes, her left eye.
Okay. Now, when we saw pictures that you identified for Mr. Jackson, the decedent's head was like this. So you went around her and checked the response in the left eye over here?
I reached across her face, yes.
Okay. Did you move her face to check the response in her left eye?
No, not for pupil response, other than lifting the eyelids,
You did lift the eyelids,
yes.
okay? And did you lift both eyelids now? Or just one?
Just the left,
Okay. And was that with the same, you didn't change your gloves, you used the same gloves, I assume, through the whole examination?
yes,
Okay. And after that also, you said that you lifted her hair and moved her head slightly from side to side, correct?
yes.
I have a little bit different view of a picture. Shows. Mark this one, BB, Jennifer, it's 2.076. Two dot oh seven six. Okay. Okay. Now, I'm going to bring you, if it's okay with Your Honor, the original.
Yes.
So I know it's a little hard to see. 'Cause you're down there. Now, let me see. You see the neck area here, that little V area, that little white V area?
Yes,
Okay. Was that there when you moved your head from side to side?
yes, it was,
And it's kind of a little area there that looks a little devoid of blood? You see that?
yes,
Okay. Now, when you first saw her, her chin was resting on her chest right where that area would be, correct?
I don't recall that it was in the center.
Okay. In your notes, you indicated her chin was resting on her chest. Is your testimony that you don't recall today it was?
That it was on her chest, I don't recall specifically where.
Okay, that's fine. All right. Then you wanted to look at more, visualize more any possible injuries, and again, you moved your head slightly from side to side, right?
Yes,
And then you came back and you patched her up to the monitor, correct?
yes,
And in the pictures, those patches are seen down here, correct?
yes.
All right. Did anyone ask you to collect those patches and preserve them?
No,
Did you look to see whether any of those patches went on the two patches that were up here, whether when they were removed, they took off any blood from either her body or her jacket?
I didn't look to see.
Okay. Did anyone ask you to leave the patches there?
Yes,
Who asked you to leave the patches there?
a police officer who was photographing.
Did you assume those patches were going to be collected?
Yes,
Now, when you were interviewed on March 10th by someone from the Los Angeles Sheriff's Department, did you ever tell anybody that her head, the decedent's head, could be positioned over her left shoulder as a result of your brief examination of her?
I don't recall the specifics of the interview.
Okay. May I approach her? So it starts here. I'm going to ask you to read this to yourself from down here.
Okay,
I think it ends here.
okay,
Okay. And then when you tell, if you could just tell me, I'm going to say here just so I don't have to keep going.
okay.
Thank you. Did that help refresh your recollection as to whether or not you indicated in the past that you could have easily positioned her head over her left shoulder as a result of the brief examination of the decedent?
Yes, it did.
Okay, and you did tell that to one of the detectives from the Los Angeles Sheriff's Department, correct?
Yes, I did.
Now, you also indicated that you placed the 4 patches. 2 of them were on her thighs, correct?
Yes.
Did you have to move her slip in any way to put the patches on her thighs?
I pinched the stockings and tore a hole large enough for the patch.
Okay. And do you remember exactly where on the thigh that was, if you remember?
Roughly mid-thigh.
Okay. All right. Now, with regard to the other 2 patches, I'm going to show you another picture. Jennifer, it's 1202, counsel.
You need this marked?
Yes, I do. That would be CC on it?
Yes.
And if I could bring it also up to them.
All right.
Okay.
Yes.
And on here, that round circle, that's one of the patches, areas that you put. But when you take the patch away, it leaves that round circle.
It could have left that, yes.
Okay. And then, do you know how it was that after you took the patch away, that this blood is in the area of the round circle?
No, I don't.
Okay, and that's one of the patches, again, that you left on the floor to be collected by somebody else, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And then you also indicated, did you not in the past, that you did see blood stains on the right side of her jacket and on her jacket lapel, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Now, did you look to see if there were any, are you trained, let me just go back, are you trained in the area of microscopic blood stains?
No, I'm not.
Okay. So you're not trained to identify blood spatter, correct?
I'm
And
not.
you're not trained to identify a microscopic tissue spatter or anything of that sort, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So when Mr. Jackson was asking you about blood flow, really that's all you're trained in, not the scientific area of blood spatter, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Now, you called the notes that you wrote a supplemental report.
My own personal supplemental notes, yes.
Okay, so that when you had your formal EMS report for 2-3, the notes that you wrote subsequently are considered your own personal supplemental report, correct?
Correct.
And you actually handed them in to the district attorney sometimes subsequently as supplemental notes, correct?
As requested, yes.
As requested. Now, did you ever see any of the officers that you saw in the foyer area again?
It's possible. I don't know.
If you remember.
I don't remember.
Okay. Now, one of the things you did see in the foyer area was an air taser lead, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And Jennifer, 2.085, counsel? You're on this.
As double D? All right.
Is that okay? Can you see that from here? Let me
Yes,
bring
I
that
can.
closer to you. And is this the item, air taser, and the leads that you talked about seeing in the foyer area?
All I remember seeing were the leads themselves.
Okay. All right, and then Jennifer, 2.116, that would be double E?
Yes.
Okay. Now, when you saw the leads, did you notice whether or not that lead that's here was under the decedent's shoe?
I didn't remember specifically its location.
Did you pick up her shoes in any way while you were there?
No, I didn't.
Okay. Did you touch the bottom of her soul in any way while you were there?
No, I didn't.
Okay. Did anyone explain to you what had happened at the scene before you arrived?
No,
Did you know whether or not there had been any altercation at the scene before you arrived?
no,
Because your primary focus was completely on rendering aid to a decedent or a
but
possible
to
person's
any-
life.
Yeah, to any potential injuries.
Okay. Aside from the supplemental report that you did, your EMS report, did you have any further interviews with anyone from the district attorney's office besides Mr. Jackson?
Yes, somebody came to the station to interview me.
And do you know when that was?
No, I don't.
And is that a different interview than the one that you did with the sheriff's department in March of 2003?
No, those transcripts reflect that interview.
That reflects that interview. Okay, so aside from those interviews, are there any other interviews you've had?
Not that I recall.
Okay, thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Redirect?
Just very briefly, Your Honor.
You may.
Steal these from you. Take a quick look. Okay, taking a look at, actually, Sudie. No, that's fine, that's the same photo. Just a close-up. I'm gonna approach one more time.
May.
That's an enlarged photo 29. Tell me, when you spoke to the officers, when you were interviewed, and you indicated that the victim's head, or the decedent's head, was positioned with her chin on her chest, is that consistent with how you now see that the photograph depicts the person?
Yes,
Okay, so you might have seen her in this position and still written down in your notes, chin on the chest.
I may have.
Okay, you didn't indicate chin over the center of the chest, or chin over the left of the chest, or chin over the right of the chest.
No, I didn't.
Okay, just that the chin was on the chest.
Yes.
Okay. And when you were asked if you could have repositioned her head to the left, I think the quote was, Ms. Bodden asked you if you could have easily positioned the decedent's head over her left shoulder as a result of your examination. Did you have access to this photograph or these photographs, these series that you've now seen, when you were answering these questions?
I believe I did.
Did the interviewer actually have these series of
Oh,
photographs?
the interviewer who came to the station?
Correct.
No, there were no photographs
Okay,
in
that's
that
my
interview.
question.
Okay.
When you were answering those questions, you did not have the luxury of looking back at photographic evidence from the scene, correct?
Correct.
Now that you look at these photographs, does that refresh your recollection as to your best memory, how the victim's head was when you walked in?
Yes.
Does this look consistent with how you remember the victim's head being positioned when you walked in before you began touching her?
Yes, it does.
Okay. And then one more quick question. Ms. Bodden, may I have just a moment?
You may.
Ms. Bodden marked a photograph. I'm going to ask you real quickly about photograph double E. It's defense double E. Do you see that?
Yes.
All right, and I'm going to, with the course permission,
Yes.
I'm going to wear a hole in this carpet. I apologize, Your Honor.
All right.
Take a look at that photograph and tell me, does it appear that the victim's shoe is suspended off the ground from the toe all the way back to just about where that lead touches the bottom of the shoe?
There is some shadow there.
Okay, does that appear to be suspended off the ground?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, that's all I have.
Thank you, recross.
Mr. Jackson just asked you whether you ever told anyone that whether the victim's head was slumped in the center of her chest. The answer to that is you did, didn't you?
I believe I told somebody that at some point.
Yes, and that would be Detective Katz on March 10th of 2003, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so the answer is that you did tell that to the detectives.
Yes.
And you used the word center of the chest, correct?
I don't recall specifically.
Can I approach and refresh
If that's what
again?
the transcripts say.
You may.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Okay. Now, having looked at this document to refresh your recollection, the answer is yes, you do remember telling the detectives that her head was slumped in the center of her chest, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Now, in the scenes that you have gone to before, have you ever seen taser wires under a shoe of a person who is deceased?
No, I haven't.
And one other question is, you did not lift her hair and move her head slightly until you already did the assessment on her carotid arteries and moved her head from side to side, correct?
In assessing the airway, I did move her head just a little bit.
From side to side, correct?
Yes.
And in that, you're wearing gloves so you don't get any blood on you, correct?
Correct.
And after you did that, you did then move her hair a little bit, correct?
Correct.
Thank you. That's all I have, Your Honor.
Thank you.
Nothing further, Your Honor.
Thank you. Subject to recall, you're excused. Thank you very much for being here. You may step down.
Thank you.
Before you call your next witness, let me, would it help you to go over what you wanted to do now so that we don't have to take a break between direct?
That would be fine.
All right, we'll take our break now. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take our afternoon recess. Keep in mind the admonition. It may be a few minutes longer. The defense has to go over some transcripts and material, so hopefully not, but we'll see how we're doing. All right, we're in recess.
That makes no sense. None at all whatsoever. Everything was going fine, and then it switched to the next video, and Court TV buffered. And because Court TV buffered, StreamYard crashed. It makes no sense. Everything was fine until Court TV's website went nuts. I don't. And then, like, as soon as Court TV went okay, like I was ready to push play and go, then StreamYard crashed. It's like StreamYard doesn't want to cooperate with Court TV. But Daddy, you have food. She can't hush.
HER Rodriguez. RODRIGUEZ.
Thank you. You may proceed. To February 3rd of 2003.
Except for the very first crash.
Were you employed at that time?
Yes, I was.
What was your job?
I was a police detective with the Alhambra Police Department.
How long had you been employed with Alhambra Police Department as of that day?
15 years.
So now it's been
I did.
and you were then officer or detective Pineda?
Pineda, yes.
Okay. Thanks, Roger. She said it better than I did. And so now you got married and you're Officer Rodriguez.
Correct.
Okay, thanks. You said you were working
Morning.
back and forth from home to work.
Yes, I did.
On the way to work that day, did you have your police radio on in your police car?
Yes, I did.
And did you hear some radio traffic that changed your plans that morning?
Yes, I did.
What was that radio traffic?
It was a call for service regarding a shot heard at the 1600 block,
1700?
perhaps. Yes.
Okay. We heard that radio traffic from Alhambra Police Department that there were shots fired at 1700 Grandview. What did you do?
I telephoned the watch commander's office to let the I was en route. That I needed to plan for.
As a detective, that would be part of your duties, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
City, could we have People's 21? Officer, we put up People's 21 here. It's an exhibit with two photographs, A and B. Would you look at those and tell us if you recognize the residence shown in photograph B in People's 21?
Yes, I do recognize it.
Is that where you went that morning?
Yes, it was.
About what time did you arrive?
I arrived at 6:10 in the morning.
What was happening? What was going on there? And after you did that, did you just wait for further instructions?
Oh, no, I notified my supervisor.
At some point, did either you suggest or someone else suggest the need for GSR kit to be done on a...
I was advised to have that completed on a particular person.
Okay, who's that?
Santana?
And was he the supervisor at that, at 1700 for that morning?
No, she's my direct supervisor with the detective. She on our reporting party, which was Adriana D'Souza.
And what did you do to accomplish that?
I initially requested that a GSR kit be brought to the scene because I was.
Mark another exhibit, please. This would be People's 41, I believe that.
Sorry, guys. I don't know what's going on with Court TV today. It would be so much better if they would just put this on their YouTube channel. And then I could just download them all.
Esther, Esther Rodriguez.
Well, if I try to get us back where we were, it's just going to buffer. I don't remember where we were. Dang it.
Rodriguez, ROD.
Where is she? That was the most pitiful meow. Where are you?
And I completed those on a few other occasions where I have attempted to gain gunshot residue off of the hands of subjects.
Over your years of experience, how many times do you think you've?
Probably around 5 times.
Okay. In all honesty, it's a pretty easy test to administer, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
And why is that?
Because the instructions are on the package and they're very few.
Alhambra Police Department that morning, February 3rd, with Mr. Souza. You found a GSR kit, correct?
Yes,
And you started to administer the test. Is that right?
that's correct.
Are all these kits numbered in some fashion?
There's a serial number on them, yes.
Do you recall the serial number of the kit that you used to administer the test to Mr. D'Souza?
Yes,
What number was it?
it's 27637.
27637? Is that correct?
Yes,
Okay. And that serial number is somewhere on the outside of the kit, is that right?
that's correct.
Is it also inside, or that same number repeated inside on various items inside the kit?
Yes, it is.
On what items?
It would be on the actual discs, I believe, that are used to collect the gunshot residue.
So while you were there with Mr. D'Souza at the Alhambra Police Department with this kit, briefly go through and tell us how you administered this test to Mr. D'Souza.
Having placed gloves on my own hands, the instructions call for taking one disc and removing like there's a cover on it so that the exposed portion is sticky. And depending on which disc, because it says on the disc, I think L for left and R for right, what I happen to do, if it was the right hand, is I would take the sticky portion and basically tap in and around the web of the hand, the inside of the hand, and perhaps some of the fingers, whatever would be exposed in that particular area. I put the cap on, place it in its proper envelope, and repeat the same process with the other sticky portion.
And you did that with both discs for left and right hand, put them back in the envelopes, correct?
That's correct.
And what did you do then?
Sealed up the envelope and put it into our property system, so I booked it.
You booked it into evidence with the Alhambra Police Department, is that right?
That's correct.
At the beginning of that answer, the one before that, you said that before you administered the test, you put on gloves. Is that right?
That's correct.
Some kind of like plastic gloves?
That's correct.
Why?
So the exposed portion of the sticky disc wouldn't pick up anything that would be on my hands and only pick up trace evidence on whoever I was trying to gain the evidence from.
That's because you handle guns too. You're a police officer, isn't that right?
Yes,
So by having the plastic gloves on, you prevented contamination from your person while you're performing the test on Mr. D'Souza. Is that correct?
that's correct.
So you performed the test, booked it in evidence, and is that the last you dealt with Mr. D'Souza that day?
Yes, it was.
Okay. He remained in the station room, perhaps to talk to other people?
I don't.
Let's just feed her the answer that you want. That's called leading, and you're not supposed to do that on direct. But you got her to say what you wanted her to say.
Remember.
Okay. Thank you. Nothing further.
Officer Rodriguez, my name is Linda Kenny Bodden. How are you?
Good.
Okay, good. All right, I'm going to ask you a few questions on behalf of Mr. Phil Spector, okay? Now, you said that your starting time was 6 a.m. in the morning.
That's my normal starting time, yes.
Had you were en route to the police department in an unmarked car, and then you didn't get to the police department? Is that my understanding of your testimony? You went right to Alhambra? To Grandview? Did you go to the police department, or did you go to Alhambra first, the Grandview Avenue address?
I believe I went to the Grandview address first.
Yes. And Mr. Dixon asked you a question. He said that's because there could have been a serious crime and you needed to be there, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And in fact, you filed the police report on this case on February 3rd, 2003, correct?
I wrote a report regarding that.
You wrote a report regarding that, okay? And in that report, you indicated that there was a crime, correct?
That's correct.
And you indicated the crime on February 3rd, 2003 as murder, correct?
Yes.
Okay. You also indicated that when you went to Alhambra, when you wrote this report, that you entered a crime scene, correct?
Yes.
And so you made that assumption immediately on February 3rd, 2003, correct?
What assumption?
That it was a crime scene.
Yes.
Right. And in fact, you went back to the Alhambra address on February 4th, correct?
Yes.
And you called it a crime scene on that date also, correct?
Yes.
And you went back again on February 7th, right?
Yes.
And you called it a crime scene on that day also, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And when you did interviews of, you also interviewed paramedic, Riggs, right?
I don't recall an interview with him.
Right. But in any event, in the report that you drafted on February 3rd and February 4th, you called the 1700 Grandview address a crime scene, right?
Yes.
Okay. Now, when you got to the Alhambra address, the front doors were wide open, were they not?
Yes, they were.
Okay. And you said that there were several officers in the foyer?
No, objection, that misstates the evidence.
Sustained, you may rephrase or ask it in a
Did you?
Goes beyond the scope of the rep, else.
Well, I sustain the objection.
Okay. Before you decided that there was a GSR kit, or requested to take a GSR kit on Mr. D'Souza, did you know why you were requested to take a GSR kit on him?
Objection irrelevant. He was asked to do it.
Sustained.
Okay. You were asked to do a GSR kit, correct?
Yes.
And did you take Mr. D'Souza from the 1700 address back to the police station?
Yes, I did.
And you already been at the 1700 address, correct?
Yes.
For how long?
For how long between what time periods,
You
ma'am?
already took Mr. D'Souza back to the Alhambra police station. Do you have your report with you?
I do.
Would that refresh your recollection if you were able to refer to it?
Well, I just remember we left at 7:45, or we got to the station at 7:45, Mr. D'Souza and myself.
Okay, so that would be one about, you left about Alhambra when then?
I could only guesstimate.
Okay, that's fine.
It only takes me about 5 minutes to get from that location to the station, so I
Okay.
left at 7:35.
Okay, and then had you done anything else before being requested to take the GSR? Had you yourself done anything else at the scene?
Yes.
Okay, and in your report that you wrote that it was a crime scene right on February 3rd, correct?
Yes.
Okay, had you yourself done anything at the scene, any investigation at the scene?
Objection beyond the scope of the rep.
Those are bias on the,
I'm going to allow it for that reason.
had you yourself done anything at the scene?
Yes.
Okay. What did you do?
I spoke to Mr. D'Souza.
Okay, did you do anything else?
I made some inquiries with the officers that were at the scene.
Okay, and what officers were there at the scene that you made inquiries of?
Officer Henry Reyes and Officer Garrett Kennedy.
Okay, and after making inquiries, and I don't want to know what they told you, if you're making inquiries of them and speaking to D'Souza, and you came back and you drafted your report sometime during February 3rd, correct?
I started my report, yes.
All right, had you, at that point, before you started your report, had you talked to the coroner?
No.
Besides interviewing Mr. D'Souza and making those two inquiries that you mentioned, had you done any further investigation?
I guess I'm not clear as to what time period you're speaking about.
Before drafting the first draft of your report that indicated this was a crime scene?
Yes, because I had returned back to the crime scene.
Okay, but you're calling it a crime scene, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, had you done any further investigation at that scene?
Yes,
Okay. Did you see the EMT person at the scene?
yes,
Is part of that further investigation that you did was looking at what the EMT or EMS person, the paramedic, was doing?
Objection, relevance.
I think this is going far beyond, it doesn't go to the subject matter you indicated sustained.
Okay, so at this point, on February 3rd, you had already designated this as a crime of murder, right?
yes.
Thank you, I have nothing further.
Thank you, redirect.
You told Ms. Kenny Vaughn a number of times that this was a crime scene in your mind. Is that because there was a person shot and dead there? And there were police officers there in yellow cape and? Is that right?
The question is leading, if you can rephrase it in a non-leading fashion.
Why did you think this was a crime scene?
Because there was a handgun next to a person that was dead.
Thank you, nothing further.
Thank you.
Is that the only reason?
No, it's not.
And the other reason is because you had already talked to Mr. D'Souza, correct?
That's correct.
And you accepted what he told you as accurate and true, correct?
Yes,
And you didn't do any further investigation after seeing a handgun and talking to Mr. D'Souza before you designated it a crime scene, correct?
yes,
The coroner had not been there yet, correct?
that's correct.
Thank you, I have nothing further.
Thank you, redirect.
Nothing further, thank you.
All right, subject to record excuse, thank you for being here, you may step down. Do you have, that's it? All right, ladies and gentlemen, sometimes during trials, we run out of witnesses, we try not to. You look heartbroken, okay. We have run out of witnesses, that does happen. It's not going to happen very often, but you just have to go with it when it does. We're going to be in recess. Now, tomorrow, we will not be in session. As you know, or you should know, or perhaps you don't, some of the attorneys in the case are not from Los Angeles. They have requested, since the Memorial Day holiday is coming up, a chance to reconnect with their families, which is reasonable for them, probably reasonable for you as well. It gives you an extra day, and I see smiles and nods, and that's fine. Whatever keeps the trial moving and together over the long run actually works out very well. So we're going to be in recess until Tuesday because Monday is the holiday. Looking at the calendar, I think July, we're in very good shape. June, I'm sorry, in July, assuming we're still going, except with the July 4th weekend, which everyone has requested off, and you're aware of that, and we will be off that 1 week if we're still in session. We're in pretty good shape for the duration. So keep in mind the admonition, especially over a long holiday. We will see you Tuesday morning at 9:30. Thank you very much. We're in recess.
Let's see this. Let's hope this one goes smoother than the last one. I don't know what it is about the switch over to the next video. It just doesn't want to go smoothly. This is Dr. Pini. Come on, Court TV.
All right, the defendant, is there something to do before we get to the jurors?
Just briefly, Your Honor, we have two experts here, Dr. Spitz, Dr. Mayo, and we've been informed the prosecution they're going to be assisting us during Dr. Payne's testimony. We just wanted to advise the court that.
Thank you.
There are some limiting motions that we'd like to get.
I don't want to use the jurors' time.
What kind of experts? Medical experts? That would be cool. That would be appropriate. Other courts should do that. Allow medical experts to sit during medical testimony. That would be a smart thing to do. Especially when the experts are wrong. Like Brennan's stupid expert that doesn't think you can get a contra-coup injury any other way than falling. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm ranting again. That's all I can think about anymore, y'all, is that stupid Karen Reed trial.
time right now, but we'll get to them. Anything else? Are we ready to bring in the jurors?
One thing very briefly.
Yes.
I've raised this with Mr. Dix and Mr. Jackson this morning regarding a potential witness later this week, Gregory Diamond. And we'll take this, we don't need to take it now, but I was preparing him over the weekend and I noticed that there's a number of items, paper items, that I think both sides would like to have access to because of the sensitive nature of this witness, because of the privilege issues. I made a list and I was hoping that maybe at the end of the day, we could take a few minutes in chambers and go through it so we don't waste the jury's time.
Fine, thank
But
you.
that would absolutely be necessary to hand before we get that witness.
Okay. Anything else?
Yeah, I guess my question is, this rather lengthy motion that the defense filed this morning, that we've just got, deals with Dr. Pinion, and I guess the scope of cross-examination. I want to make sure that the court doesn't believe that you've read the motion. I just barely had a chance to scan it this morning.
Before his cross-examination, well, whatever is necessary, we may have to defer it so that you can get a chance to respond to it.
Is there anything that the court noticed or noted in their motion that I should be aware of on direct examination insofar as doors are open or doors are not open?
I sort of had to inferentially draw certain conclusions, which would be that I guess they're trying to, the purpose of the motion, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, is to cross-examine him on things that he hasn't reviewed, which has to do, my guess is probably some kind of psychological autopsy of the victim. Is that correct?
Well, there was
I just learned a lesson. And I'm going to share it with you since we have crocheters and knitters in here. Don't eat peeps while you're crocheting. Because you'll get your yarn all sticky.
two giant binders of stuff that were sent to the medical examiner's office by the district attorney's office that I asked for that in discovery, where's his notes regarding his review? And it was reported to me that he did review that material that was sent by the district attorney's office, that supposedly he reviewed other materials that I don't have discovery on. The stuff that we basically provide in discovery. I haven't seen any notes on that, but I'm going to have to wait to see what Dr. Pena says. I think that's what he says as far as what he reviewed or didn't review or received but didn't review. We'll just have to kind of wait till direct and see how that plays out.
All right. Does that answer your question or not?
No,
That's absolutely necessarily a motion. It's just simply my take on the law as to what the scope of the cross-examination could be, depending upon what the foundational facts are.
One of the things that I wanted to bring up before Dr. Pena testified, obviously, was that scope and what the motion is unbelievably vague. I mean, if they want to cross him on something, they should list what they want to cross him on so I can respond to it. I don't know what Mr. Ford is talking about with regard to just generally stuff that he didn't rely on or stuff he might have relied on or stuff he should have relied on and didn't. I mean, none of that is listed. If they're talking about the pumpkin pie stuff and Jennifer Hayes stuff, then we've got a pretty serious issue that we need to discuss outside the presence of the jury.
I agree, but I don't think that will directly affect how you put on your direct.
Then I have no objection to waiting.
Okay, let's get going with the jurors.
Okay.
Let's bring in the jurors, please.
You do solemnly swear that the testimony you may give in the cause now pending before this court shall be the truth, the whole truth, and so help you God.
I do.
Please state and spell your name for the record.
Luis Pena, first name is Louis, last name is Pena.
Thank you. You may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Doctor, what is your current position?
I'm a physician, a forensic Los Angeles County Department of Coroner.
What exactly is a forensic pathologist, doctor?
It is a subspecialty in pathology in which a doctor will perform autopsies on a daily basis.
This doctor must be related to the judge from the Cornway Corner trial. I don't know why I'm in such a silly mood today, guys.
To determine what is known as the cause of death, or what is a specific injury or illness that caused that person to die. Number two, determine what is known as the matter of death or circumstance of suicide. Again,
input, our investigator team, so we need input to determine mainly what is the manner of death. And that's mainly our two functions, cause of death and manner of death.
Doctor, do you hold currently a California medical license?
Yes,
How long have you held that license?
since 1991.
What education, training, and background qualifies you to perform the duties that you just explained to the jurors that a forensic pathologist performs on a daily basis?
I have a medical degree from the University of Minnesota that I earned in 1990. I did a residency program known as pathology for 6 years here in Los Angeles at the LA County Medical Center and also at the VA hospital in Wadsworth in West LA. I then subspecialized in the area known as forensic pathology here at the Los Angeles County Department of Coroner for 1 year. As Mr. Jackson alluded to earlier, I hold a current California valid medical license since 1991. I'm board certified by the American Board of Pathology in the fields known as anatomic, clinical, and forensic pathology. And to date, I've done over 3,300 autopsies and testified about 260 times in court.
Doctor, do you perform an autopsy? You alluded to this just a second ago in an answer to an earlier question, that you perform autopsies to basically come to two conclusions. The cause of death specifically and the manner of death, correct?
Yes.
Describe for the jurors what the difference between a cause of death and a manner of death is.
A cause of death, the specific injury or illness that will cause a person to die. So, for example, a specific injury could be anything from like an auto accident, very simple. When someone receives what's called blunt force trauma to the body, as a result of those injuries, for example, head trauma, neck trauma, or commonly we see chest trauma, of course, they will die as a result of that, whether it be at the scene or at a residence or on the street, wherever, or in a hospital. That is known as the cause of death from an injury. Also, drugs are a notorious example that we see in our office that can cause accidental type deaths or injury type deaths. We also have exposures from the environment, like asbestosis is still big in our county. The other example, natural diseases, of course, you think of the heart. Heart disease is probably the number one disease that we see in our county, and those are causes of death. Manner of death, once again, I need input, and we have what are called investigator coroners who are at the death scene or go to the hospital for us. They'll obtain medical records, talk to family, friends. The police will be involved currently with them on all our cases, so we're able to discern from that information, does this need to be further investigated? Maybe the detectives, do they need involved? So it's a team effort. So with all that information put together from the investigator coroner, the law enforcement agencies, and here in LA County, that can be the LA Police Department, LA Sheriff's Crime Lab, or LA Sheriff's Department, or even the FBI we work with commonly, in putting that information together from them in terms of reports or interviews, meetings. We can hopefully discern whether this is a manner of death that would be necessitate a classification as natural, accident, suicide, homicide, etc.
So from that answer, to use the first example that you used, if you were to take a garden variety case that you might be assigned to work on, you might assign a cause of death to be blunt force trauma to a certain particular individual. Yet the manner of death might need to go beyond just the autopsy table, look at extrinsic information and the circuits around that cause of blunt force trauma and determine that it was a blunt force trauma caused by, for instance, a car accident.
That's correct.
Okay, and so the manner of death is separated from the cause of death insofar as the cause of death tells us exactly what mechanism caused the death, blunt force trauma or stab wound to the neck or whatever else it might be, versus the manner of death, how that death occurred or how that blunt force trauma or stab wound or whatever occurred, correct?
Yes.
All right. In each of those cases that you've talked about, and you said you've done somewhere in excess of 3,300 different. Here in the Los Angeles County Coroner's Office, is every deceased person assigned a very specific and unique coroner's case number?
Yes.
Describe how those coroner's case numbers are assigned.
We'll get a call through our investigations. There's a certain unit over there that receives all calls, whether it be from law enforcement at a death scene, and they're right away given a number, because it's going to be a coroner's case. They establish that we have to take jurisdiction of that case, whether it be trauma, violent death, suicide, overdose. We'll take all those cases, of course, and that number has already come in, has already been assigned. For instance, for goes to a death scene, that number has been already pre-assigned.
Are there ever any two coroner's case numbers that are assigned to the, I'm sorry, I should say two decedents who are assigned the same coroner's case number?
No.
Is the coroner's case number assigned by way of two separate numbers? The first number indicating the year of the decedent's death, and the second number, the sequential order in the coroner's office in which that decedent is assigned to a case.
Yes.
All right. So in other words, a coroner's case number that starts out 99-005th coroner's case number assigned, that decedent would have that coroner's case. In this case, did you perform, or were you assigned
Start it, Court TV.
to perform an autopsy on coroner's case number 2003-00937?
Yes.
And specifically, was that decedent Lana Clarkson?
Yes, it was.
Was that coroner's case number 03, or what's abbreviated as 03-937, is that a unique coroner's case number assigned to Lana Clarkson and only to Lana Clarkson?
Yes, it is.
Dr. Pena, when were you first assigned to begin reviewing this case?
I was assigned the case on a Monday afternoon. My boss called me. And noted that I would be assigned this case, 03937, and the decedent was unknown actually at that time, but he wanted me to go to the death scene. That's the first time I heard of the case and given that number.
The scope of your job to go to a death scene if it's required?
It's very uncommon.
Did you go to the death scene in this particular case?
Yes.
And where was that? Was that at 1700 Grandview?
Yes, it was.
All right. About what time did you get there?
It was about 5:35 in the afternoon on a Monday, February 3rd, 2003.
Did you review the scene?
Yes.
And did you review Lana Clarkson's body as she lay where she was found?
Yes.
Why were you asked, or I guess I should rephrase that, why did you actually go to the crime scene or to the death scene?
And actually, the day that I went on that Monday, February 3rd, in the evening, and once the scene was cleared, I was asked to go ahead and go into there's a foyer in the back of a home, basically. But again, you can see the body at two different points of time. I'm going to see her actually at the moment there when she's sitting in the chair. I can assess her, get an overall general assessment at that time. And the second time I'm going to see her, of course, is the following day when I do the autopsy. And the second important point that I've learned from experience is you remember the case a heck of a lot better when you go to the scene. I don't know what it is, but my experience with a few I have gone to, you do remember it a lot better, and you're more apt to pay attention to things. The other thing is that you hear firsthand when you're there, the detectives will come to you and tell you the local circumstances. They'll give you their impressions of what happened, what's going on. Now, here's what we heard, here's what someone may have said. And that's important. And so I factor all those in at that time.
Did you perform any procedure? Well, let me back up for just a second. I assume from your answer that this was not the first scene that you had actually gone out to, correct?
No.
Okay, so it had happened before?
Yes.
It's just relatively rare, I assume.
That's correct.
All right. The fact that you went to 1700 Grandview, Doctor, does that mean that the facts and circumstances of this particular case do in fact stand out in your mind more than some of the other 3,300 autopsies that you performed in your career?
Yes.
Did you perform any procedures, Doctor, on Lana Clarkson at the location 1700 Grandview?
No.
Did you review her body?
Yes.
Grossly review it, meaning visually?
Yes.
Okay. Did that assist you in ultimately making findings and opinions and conclusions in this case?
Actually, it did, yes.
Okay. At some point, Doctor, was the body of Lana Clarkson moved back to the coroner's office?
Yes.
And how was that facilitated?
That was done through our investigator coroner, Barbara Nelson, who was assigned that case that day. We had a coroner criminalist and toxicologist, Ms. Jamie Lintemoot, L-E-M-O-O-T, also, and through their assistance, the body's moved on to plastic, from the chair onto a plastic tarp and put onto a coroner van with the assistance of one of our technologists who brought the van in. And that only body was placed in the van and back to the coroner's office on that evening.
Because of the wounds, and we'll talk in much more detail in just a second about the wounds that you saw before she was moved.
Yes, I recall that with a towel they put over her face.
Okay, and that is relatively, I'm assuming, standard procedure to kind of stem the flow of blood that may be a result of moving the body.
Yes.
All right. Ultimately, when she was taken to the coroner's office, do you remember if she was laid on the coroner's table in her clothing?
Yes.
And that would be standard procedure, correct?
Yes, it would.
She was photographed in that position, correct?
Yes.
And you remember she was laying on her left side, is that right?
That's correct.
When the towel was taken from her head, was there blood flow that emanated from her body onto the table?
Yes.
So eventually, Doctor, she was ultimately laying in what could reasonably be described as a sort of a pool of blood, or blood that was pooling on her left side?
Yes.
Was there also, or would you expect that there would also be tissue flow from her wounds from the head area?
Yes.
So along with blood, there might be mental fluid or brain matter or brain fluid as well.
Depending on the location of the weapon, in this case, generally I expect maybe oral cavity and back of the throat type tissue to come out.
2003 at about 10:30 in the morning, did you perform an autopsy on Miss Lana Clarkson?
Yes.
Was that under coroner's case 3-00937?
Yes.
And I'll additional reasons, Doug. Once you performed the autopsy, did you prepare a protocol or an autopsy report?
Yes, I did.
And does that autopsy report and all its the same unique coroner's case number?
Yes, it does.
Okay. Who's in attendance, if you recall, at the autopsy, when you performed the autopsy on Miss Lana Clarkson?
There are two LA Sheriff detectives, Detective Paul Fournier. Do you need me to spell that? Okay, Detective Richard Tomlin, Dr. Michael Bodden from New York, Investigator Barbara Nelson, and the coroner criminalist toxicologist, Ms. Jamie Lintemoot, and the technician, Mr. Richard Grahalva, Grajalva, was also assisting me during the autopsy. And I'm sorry, one of the senior doctors assisted me and was there the whole time, Dr. William Sherry, Sherry.
You indicated Dr. Michael Bodden was one of the people who were there, or who was there at the time that you performed the autopsy. Was that a courtesy that you extended because somebody from the defense had asked if he could attend the autopsy?
I believe so, yes.
All right. He didn't perform any work on the autopsy.
No,
He simply watched as you performed the work.
that's correct.
You indicated that there were 2 investigators at the autopsy as well, correct?
Yes,
Is that standard operating procedure to have the investigative agency represented at an autopsy like this?
on homicides it is, yes.
Take a look, if you will. I'm going to ask that we mark these people's next in order. Just a second before we pick it up. This is an 8.5 by 11 sheet.
It's 42.
It's an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper. I'll have an enlargement placed on the overhead. I'd like this to be marked as People's 42, and it bears 3 photographs. They appear to be autopsy photographs, 2 of Miss Clarkson's head, 1 of her mouth and tooth area. Doctor, do you recognize what's depicted in photograph A, B, and C of People's 42?
Yes.
How do you recognize those photographs?
Well, I recall Miss Lana Clarkson, number 1, and number 2 that has a coroner's case number. You'll see the blue 3-inch ruler with the coroner's case number and the date that that photograph in particular is taken. And they're all label A, B, and C.
Doctor, in drawing your attention to photograph A, it appears that, in fact, there is a blue ruler there. Is that indicative of a coroner's photograph?
Yes.
Where was that photograph taken?
That one there would have been taken at at the autopsy suite at the coroner's office.
Taking a look at photograph B, as in boy, that appears to be of Miss Clarkson. Photograph A and photograph B. Could you explain that for the jurors, please?
What you see in photograph B, Miss Clarkson has been washed off after all her clothing has been removed and all, of course, evidentiary items that we had seen at the scene prior, everything. Now we can go ahead and wash the body. Now you have a photograph of her face, actually, that you see now in picture B.
Taking a look back at photograph A, Doctor, you indicated earlier in your testimony that Ms. Clarkson was on her left side and that she was bleeding somewhat after the towel was removed from her head. Is this photograph indicative of that state? In other words, after she was placed on the gurney and after the towel was removed and some substantial bleeding, the blood pooling under her head and appears to be her left shoulder, correct?
Yes.
Is that indicative of the blood and tissue material that would have flowed from her head wound onto her left side at the coroner's office?
Yes, it is.
Taking a look at photograph C, Doctor, can you describe for the jurors what they're looking at, please?
Yes, photograph C is, that was taken the day after I did the autopsy on February 5th, 2003. A dentist came down and assisted me with that. And that's what you see, those little plastic retractors on both sides of her mouth, exposing the views of 2 upper front teeth that were actually fractured because of the injury she sustained. And the 2 upper front teeth, called the central incisors, are fractured. And a little portion of the left, what's called lateral incisor of that tooth, is also broken off just a little bit. But that's what that's showing mainly.
And those tools utilized by the coroner's office to spread the lips, that is a normal tool used to show substantial mouth wounds or mouth injuries?
Yes.
All right, go ahead and take that off for us.
I don't know if it's experience or not, but I would think if a cop told an ME that somebody was murdered, I think unless there were gross differences that they found on autopsy, then that's what they would put on the autopsy. So I'm not sure experience really weighs into that. I think they would trust that the cops had enough law enforcement experience to know whether or not, because homicide is just death at the hands of another. So I think that I guess what I'm getting at is I don't see that there's anything wrong with an ME agreeing with the cops that it was a murder or that it was a homicide. I don't see that as being unduly pressured into saying. Now, in the Karen Reed case, they were trying to pressure her into saying homicide, and she didn't. She said undetermined. So I don't know that it's inappropriate to let the cops, like I said, unless there's like a gross a gross finding in the autopsy that totally discounts what the cops tell you. I think it's okay to go into an autopsy thinking that it was a homicide if that's what the cops tell you.
Um, Doctor, did you reach any findings? I don't want to get to your ultimate conclusions at this point, but I want to direct your attention very narrowly to findings regarding any wounds that Ms. Clarkson suffered.
Yes.
Okay, what wounds did you find or wound did you find that Ms. Clarkson had suffered?
Do you want me to start with the head first? I'm sorry, the mouth wound or?
Was it a stab wound, a gunshot wound? What was this?
Okay, it was a Ms. Clarkson received a shot wound to her oral canal.
Fatal wound.
Yes.
Did the bullet pass through her oral cavity and into other areas of her body?
Yes, it did.
Could you describe where it passed through and where it came to rest?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. If you look at my index finger, I'm going to put my finger in counsel in my mouth, like this, but just to keep it simple, when it's in the mouth, it was discharged. The bullet then nicked the tongue and it lacerated the tongue, causing hemorrhage to occur. The top part of your, and demonstrate on myself, top part of the tongue split. There's some depth to that, maybe a little over a quarter of an inch in depth, which is significant. And they both continued in a front to back direction. I'll use this on myself in a minute to get you oriented with direction in a bit. And went through the, of course, hit eventually the spinal column or the neck bone. And in the process of doing that, it broke the neck bone. We have 7 of those neck bones connected together. These are the 2 neck bones that were fractured. It's very high up in that area. That's what's called here's let's say the spinal column. That's all the messages are sent so we can act. That bullet, as it broke the bone, it went through that spinal cord and tore it apart, causing a massive ragged laceration effect. Of course, bleeding to occur. And keep in mind, when that occurs, that cord is completely severed. So there's no connection now with the brain. The separated piece of cord. Then you got the rest of the cord running down our back. So that cord is, again, is completely severed. The bullet then did a look at myself in counsel. I'll turn sideways also, just for a second. If you look at myself right about here, it's hard to show that anatomic figure, but the bullet continued right there upward, goes into the base of the skull, doesn't hit brain tissue, but more importantly, there's a little tissue that goes around the brain called the dura, D-U-R-A. It's a protective little barrier around our brain. And it went through there and tore, causing bleeding at that time to occur around the brain. So the bullet to the skull there, and it shattered most of the portion areas of the fracture. Okay. Back of the head, real simple. So counsel, if you look again, here's about where I got the bullet. It never, and just kind of put a little protuberance outward to hold the through the skull.
Stop. StreamYard. Yeah. Yeah, maybe. But, well, I was going to say, but that's on Law and Order, so that doesn't count. I mean, like on Law and Order, I've seen cops get upset with the ME because um, she's wanted them to investigate more before she would say homicide. I mean, that show is based on real life, right? But I don't know. I just don't think it's inappropriate for a cop to tell the ME how they were told or how they believe the person died. But I don't know. I could be wrong. I just they're gonna examine them anyway and come up. Darn you, StreamYard! I ain't playing with you today. This is the last one. When we're done with this, so I'm quitting.
Leave it at that for now. So this is immediate incapacitation wound given the location. Once that wound occurs to the spinal cord, there might be a few little going down the chest cavity because of the nerve down this way to the heart, for instance, and to the lungs. May have taken perhaps at best one really shallow breath, if at best.
StreamYard, stop.
What's called spinal shock because of the location.
Darn it. I pause it, and then it shows up on screen, and then I play it, and then I get a purple.
At upward now, if you can picture,
Don't work together.
there's still a little residual blood flow going up to the brain for just maybe a few seconds more, which we saw, just examine the brain. So put this in combination, the death clearly, in my opinion, was a gunshot wound of both the head and neck that caused Ms. Clarkson to die immediately.
So, doctor, when you say gunshot wound, head and neck, you're including the injuries to the spinal column or the neck bones that the bullet caused, then passing through that spinal column onto.
Oh my word. I'm not in the mood for this today. I'm just not in the mood for this today, people.
Transparency, recognize what this transparency is.
Yes.
What is that from?
This is done well after I did the autopsy. I can't remember the year, but it was before I to make a diagram of the direction of fire, basically through the tissue. That's what this is demonstrating, and where the bullet ends up. So that's what the little arrows are that you see on the screen. I don't have a pointer I could show them.
I don't either. I think we went to find one.
You may.
So, okay, thanks a lot. And for the court and this little dotted area here, that's what I drew for Mr. Sortino for the grand jury. And that's what that's indicating. Again, going through the mouth, hits the base probably right about here, the neck area probably around there. Again, the base of the skull causing the fractures. And here's where I get the bullet at the back of the head.
You indicated that there is a substantial amount of bone surrounding the spinal cord, correct?
Yes.
All right. So the bullet first made contact with, flesh toward the back of the throat, somewhere along.
And for the court and this little dotted area here, that's what I drew for Mr. Sortino for the grand jury. And that's what that's indicating. Again, going through the mouth, hits the base probably right about here, or the neck area, probably around there. Skull and the fractures, and pull it out at the back of the head.
You indicated that there is spinal cord, correct?
Yes.
All right. So the bullet first made contact with, I guess, flesh. After it nicked the tongue, it first made contact with flesh toward the back of the throat, somewhere along in here, correct?
Yes.
All right. Then it passed through the back of the throat to the soft palate, am I correct?
Yes.
And then it made contact with hard bone material. In other words, the very top of the vertebrae would have been about where my pen is pointing, correct?
Just about, that's right.
All right. Then the bullet passed through that bone material and went on through the base of the skull and lodged itself at the very point where you ended this kind of diagram at the base of the skull, correct?
Yeah.
Is it conceivable, or have you in your experience trajectory material to whip, or for example, spinal bone?
Yes, any hard bone bullets can change directions and for a short period, for a short time, and travel in an up or down or whatever direction it decides to go.
All right, so in this particular case, although the trajectory appears to be relatively consistent from front to back, the bullet could have changed direction slightly once it made contact with the bone area here, correct? You mentioned a mouthful when you were explaining what your basic findings were anatomically. I want to kind of break that down and ask you a couple of specific questions. You talked about the tongue area and the fact that the bullet first grazed the dorsum or the top of the tongue. Is that right?
Yes.
What kind of injury did you note that indicated to you anatomically that the bullet had actually grazed the top of the tongue?
There was a stellate, or like a starburst type of appearance on the top of that tongue.
Let's go to that. When you say describe for us, by the way, do you recognize Your Honor, I got ahead of myself. I'd like to go ahead and mark, with the court's permission, the transparency first as People's 43.
So marked.
And then we'll mark this coroner's diagram, People's 44, with the court's permission.
So marked.
The last one was 43, I think.
44. The diagram that is up now,
The
diagram, that is 44. 43 was the transparency of the head.
I'm sorry, Your Honor, I got ahead of myself.
It's all right.
Injury. I think of the word stellar. What does the word stellate mean?
Oh, just think of it like a starburst, like a starfish, kind of. He got, I don't know, just how to. And they have different shapes. You can make round ones. I don't know if you have ever seen any stellate. I'm trying to say, like a starfish.
Okay, so in other words, it's not a perfect hole.
Right.
In other words, as it grazed the top of the tongue, as the bullet grazed the top of the tongue, it's sort of, I don't want to be too graphic, but flesh, correct?
Yes.
All right, and split it uniformly.
Yes.
So as you look at it, it looks like a star.
Correct.
Okay, is that a classic example of a stellate injury?
Yes, it is.
And did you see that sort of injury at the top of the tongue?
Yes, I did.
Could you point to the juror? Well, let's familiarize the jurors with this diagram a little bit. This has been marked as People's 44. What is this that we're looking at, Doctor?
Okay, this is a diagram. You can see it, number 24. This is the autopsy date I did it on, which is February 4th, 2003.
Now, I'm going to interrupt you for just a second, Dr. Pena. You said it's a number 24. See in the upper left-hand corner where it's pre-marked 24?
Yes.
Is that what you're referring to?
That's correct.
There's a couple of numbers we're dealing with. This has been marked for evidence, for identification rather, as People's 44, but you're referring to a document that the coroner's office designates as a 24, correct?
That's correct.
Are there made documents that the coroner's office here in Los Angeles uses to assess. We might see one of those before this is all said and done. That's a pre-designated form that's an anatomically correct figure standing full body, correct?
Yes.
Front and back, right?
Correct.
Come on, StreamYard. We're so close to being.
Autopsy, correct?
Yes.
Now, the 24 is dedicated to the head and neck area and specifically shows a tongue that's been removed in bank, correct?
Yes.
And what does in bank mean?
I don't know.
Totally?
Totally.
All right. No, so in other words, thank you. When you take a look at and you're doing an autopsy on a decedent, and you look at the tongue, you don't simply cut the tongue out. I can't talk and do it at the same time. Here,
No.
correct? The tongue actually is a muscle that goes all the way down the throat, correct?
Correct.
Taking a look at the two diagrams on the lower right-hand side showing the left and right of something that looks very foreign and alien to us, what are we looking at?
Okay, basically, if you look, pretend you look at the top of the body, looking down on someone from let's say the top of the head. And what you're going to see, imagine you're looking through their head, looking through their mouth. Now you're going to see the tongue. This is the left side of the tongue. So you can picture it on yourself, actually. Left side of the tongue, this is the right side of the tongue, this is the front. So if you were to stick your tongue out right now, you'd just be going basically like I'm showing you right now, sticking the tongue out. And that's how you're anatomically looking at that figure, which is again the people's 44. This is the throat area, and this is the box area, trachea or tongue in. You can't see it in there, but we also have what's called the esophagus depicting, but it's all kind of splayed open. The anatomic reason for that being.
Okay, and when you remove the tongue, you remove it in block, the entire tongue comes out, correct?
Yes.
All right. Taking a look at the bottom right two diagrams, these down here on the right, what are those looking at?
Those are just.
What are we looking at?
I'm sorry. Those are just profiles of the tongue shown in a right profile. You can see this. These are salivary glands, these little circles. And if you look down over here, this is a little bone we all have. This is your voice box area, and these are strap muscles that hold everything together. That's the whole idea there. This is the left profile now, if you're to look at a left view of your own tongue, and that's all that's showing.
All right. I note that there are some substantial notations on the top view of the tongue. What are you denoting on that top view?
Basically, again, on People's 44, this is the stellate I referred to in my description. It was part of the gunshot wound when it hit this area or nicked it. I give a measurement there in 3 dimensions. When I do 3-dimension measurements for you, it's important because it tells you there's depth to that wound. So that's quite important. And I indicate that on the tongue. Then as you go further back, you're going to see some little focal. Focal just means in a unique area, but they're clustered together. But what's interesting about these bruises here, right at the back of the throat, they're still by the tongue, is that I give an area, not a depth. That means that these are superficial. There's a reason for that, and I'll explain this in a second, but they stay superficial, and that is real close to the area where you're going to start to swallow, and of course take air in. So you're oriented anatomically. And then to the left, there was this unique lesion off to the left side and left top and side of the tongue, and that had 3 measurements to it. I believe that's 1 by 1/2, but I can't see too well, by 1/2 inch, if I'm reading it right. And I described the color, which is purple. That's fine, and that was a bloody area, but that's all blood. It looked like actually a bruise, but it's all on one side of the tongue, all right? And that's what I'm describing, the 3 most, those are the only 3 that I saw.
All right. So there was bruising associated with that stellate nicking, correct? But you also saw bruising in a separate area on the left side of the tongue.
Yes.
Indicating right there, correct?
Yes.
All right. with regard to that bruise on the stellate portion of the injury, can you describe what you believe, or can you attribute that bruise to the bullet passing over and nicking the tongue?
Yes, it's in the same tracks. In other words, these little focal areas of bruising, remember the superficial ones without the depth to them? That's what I'm pointing to now. The bullet came through, and probably what happened there, it hits the spine.
Another opinion, he's offering an opinion which may be cross-examined and overruled.
The bullet may have, it struck the bone, and the bullet starts to up. So some of the lead components of the bullet might have come back. I did recover one in the trachea or esophagus. I couldn't remember where it was actually, but that's probably could explain why these are bruised up here a little bit. That's one of the explanations I thought of that could explain that.
A little bit. Passed over the tongue, nicked the tongue, and split it and bruised it at the same time.
Yes.
I want to draw your attention to the bruise on the left. Were you able to make a determination as to the mechanism of the bruising on the left?
No.
Were you able to make a determination in your mind as to, or have you been asked to make a determination in your mind as what may cause the bruise left, or of the bullet in the tongue?
A couple of weeks ago, I was asked by the prosecution, Mr. Jackson and Mr. Ocampo, to review that bruise to the left as to the mechanism or what could have caused that bruise to occur. At the time of the years have gone by, I have no idea. I didn't know. So I was asked to review my report, photos, and perhaps get a second opinion from my colleagues at work, particularly the doctor who helped me with the autopsy. And so in the interim, I went and sought those all out, and
Of his ultimate, if he has an opinion, and then I'll limit or give a limiting instruction to the jurors. I don't know what you're using it for.
I'll establish that foundation. Right. Ultimately, doctor, without telling me what your conversation was, get this way. Did I ask you to review photographs?
Yes.
Notes?
Yes.
Your autopsy report?
Yes.
Did you make specific notes about this particular area of the body? In other words, the tongue area of the body?
Oh, yes.
And those notes are relatively detailed, correct?
Correct.
As a matter of fact, you even indicated on the left portion of the bruising area, you indicated some very specific size measurements, correct?
Yes.
And you took photographs of this area. Viewed those photographs since then.
That's correct.
And the purpose for making these photographs or creating this photographic documentation of an autopsy look at certain elements of an autopsy, you can do that with some confidence because they've been photographed. You've noted the notes and conclusions regarding that injury, correct?
Yes.
Now, up until 2 weeks ago, were you ever asked specifically what the mechanism of that bruise on the left was? At that bruise on the left, did you go back and review all of those things we've talked about?
Yes.
And ultimately, based on your review of all of those things, as well as discussions with your colleagues, were you able to make an opinion or come to an opinion or reach a conclusion about that bruise?
Yes.
Okay. What did the conversation with you and your colleagues consist of?
Well, very simply, it was very short, but basically it's that bruise is very unique. It stands out. And the conclusion is blunt force trauma that it's consistent, I should say, I'm sorry. Consistent with blunt force trauma. Blunt meaning in an abrupt manner, something either struck the tongue or the strung might have, I'm sorry.
We didn't have a debate team, but I was on the high Q team, which is a trivia team. I love Come on, StreamYard.
Okay.
That's what causes the bruise.
All right. When and the bruising continues as blood flows to that area. Is that right? You've indicated that this particular blunt force trauma or this bruise was caused before the shot was fired because Ms. Clarkson would have been immediately. Can you tell how long before the shot was fired was this bruise? Did this bruise occur?
No, I can't. Yeah. I can only tell you it's recent.
Okay. Recent meaning within a few minutes or a few hours before the fatal shot was fired. It's consistent with blunt force trauma. Is that right?
Yes.
For example, if the barrel of a gun, a steel weapon, was placed into the mouth with some force, could that have been the mechanism of that bruising on the left? Could that have caused? I want to go back to what's been previously marked as People's 40. Gunshot wound. One of the things that you did demonstratively, doctor, was you actually put your finger in, or your fingers in a position of what's reasonably described thumb straight up, correct?
Yes.
When you were explaining to the jurors how the shot was fired, you actually put your finger inside your mouth, as I just did, correct?
Yes.
Why did you put your finger inside your mouth as opposed to outside of your mouth?
Clearly from the autopsy findings, this weapon was in the mouth and not outside.
When you say clearly from the autopsy findings, I want to draw your attention to something and have you explain to us what stealing and swing means.
When a weapon is discharged, there's a combustion effect to move the bullet down the barrel and out the muzzle. And it's called gunpowder. There's a process before it starts the whole event, which I won't get into. I'm not a ballistics expert. It's very simple and basic. But basically, it's moving that bullet down the nozzle. It's burning big powder. That's how you're getting the energy. So if you just see this all in slow motion, you see a lot of powder as it comes right out the muzzle, like an explosion, perhaps, and a lot of powder or dust. It's very similar to when you have a to perhaps maybe several inches away. It has to be test fired to get the specific distance. That's called sooting again. It's a black grayish debris. And your lab experts will identify that. Mr. Jackson referred to as stippling. That weapon is held a little further away now. So instead of being close range, it's called now intermediate range. And that could be anywhere from my experience in the lab testing that we have here in LA County, maybe a half inch, this can vary, up to maybe a couple feet or even more. Depends on the powder, the weapon, et cetera. So again, you're talking about a range like this, and that's again called stippling. That looks like pinpoint red uniform lesions. They're very similar, every single lesion. And if you've been to a dartboard at a pool table, pool hall, got dartboard games, you ever played it? It looks like that all around the dartboard, very pinpoint and very, all the same size. And that's what stippling basically is. So it's basically burned and unburned powder that's hitting the skin.
I lost our place, but we're past that. Past that.
in a separate area of the tongue, the left side of the tongue.
Yes,
And that's what you're indicating right there, correct?
yes.
All right. With
Okay, guys, I am done. I'm not putting up with it anymore today. I don't feel good, and I'm going back to bed. So I will see you guys on Monday. Bye.